Hello and welcome to Insights, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo. Elizabeth Omori is still out, but she will be coming up in the course of the program. Well, it is a fact that having enough food for all is the key component of growth and development, especially for a country like Nigeria. It is with that in mind, and of course not discountenancing all of the issues surrounding food insecurity in Nigeria, that we intend to discuss food security as a national priority. We will thereafter bring up another critical issue in the center of Nigeria's economic stability and growth. That conversation will center on eliminating crude oil theft in Nigeria by addressing subsisting challenges in that regard. Let's begin.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting.
Let's begin the conversation on how best to meet the increasing food demand in Nigeria. Of course, for that to happen, the necessary production growth will to a large extent have to be met by a rise in productivity. We know declining crop productivity is caused by several issues and challenges, but we also know for a fact that through innovative policy implementation and strategies, as well as significant budget commitment, Nigeria can meet agricultural sustainability and food security. Let's find out if my guest agrees with me on that. He is the president of Farmers Association of Nigeria, Kabir Ibrahim. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
It is a common fact that food availability, its quality, and of course the issue of affordability are basic problems across households in Nigeria today. I tend to believe that Nigeria's population growth and the fact that we have more mouths to feed, exacerbates this problem of food scarcity or shortages in Nigeria. How do you reckon that over the years our agricultural sector has yet to fulfill its traditional roles of, one, sufficiently feeding the population, while also, two, maybe meeting raw material requirements and needs of industries in the country, as well as providing sustainable export earnings for the economy? I know these are all, these are a gamut of issues, but where do you think, or where would you lay the blames?
I am happy to tell you that the food system is challenged for many reasons, chief of which is insecurity. We had very, very good policies from ATA to AP and now NATIP. The federal government has been doing its bit. The subnationals should come in to also invest in their farmers, because actually production takes place in the subnationals. Indeed. In the local governments and the states. Now, what is happening today is a number of factors are playing into costs now in all facets of life. But in food, everybody eats food. So the problem is more seen than heard amongst the human beings who consume. Now, the problems that happened this year or from last year were that transportation costs increased, production costs increased. The insecurity, even though is being tackled, is still there. So you have high cost or rising costs of all commodities and in everything, but especially food now that we're talking of food. Now, to be able to really sustainably provide for the growing population, we need to optimize productivity in country. And to do that, there are many, many things that have to be done. Investments in agriculture must be increased. All subnationals must take part in it. insecurity must be stemmed. So these issues, when they are done, you will have food in country. Now, stopgap importation in some areas where we thought we had sufficiency for given time frames.
When you say in some areas, would you finger, say, rice, for instance?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of effort was put in rice production, and a lot of rice had been produced. If you remember, between 2017 and even 2020, we tended to see a lot of rice in the country.
True.
But even that, you know, because we misplaced the position of rice in the polity, there was still some pockets of smuggling of rice in country. Now, I am saying we put ourselves in that problem because where you come from and where I did my youth service, rice is not staple. But everybody in Nigeria tended to think rice was the main thing. Everybody, every child was just used to rice or Indomie. So we put a lot of pressure on rice, leaving other things that are really staple unattended to. One, in optimizing or scaling up the productivity of such things and all that. So the sum total of what has happened is that we have a stress in food in this country. Now, the purchasing power of the Naira is playing a very, very strong role now because food security means availability and affordability as well as access. Now, if you go to any of the farmers markets in Abuja, you will see food, but it is costly. And therefore, the very important component of food security is not there. Therefore, your summary of no food, no availability, problems will hold water.
That is true. And you know, in responding to my first question, you've hinted at the role of public governance. I mean, when you talked about how you think subnationals should come in because primarily that's where agriculture takes place. You talked about commitment. You hinted at, you know, perhaps I want to think you meant, your inference is hinting at financial commitment, you know, in this area as well. All just to optimize productivity, your words. How exactly are, you know, these issues of boosting agricultural production, perhaps maybe even enhancing processing opportunities and perhaps expanding storage facilities, essentially, you know, to minimize post-harvest losses and, you know, enhance farmers' income? How are they, you know, all functions of public governance and policy thrust, you know, as well as implementation? How can public governance, you know, in terms of intervention, target these three key areas of production, you know, processing and storage towards helping us achieve our national food security objectives?
I'm glad that you are asking me this question today. If you remember last Thursday, there was the Economic Council meeting where the president pledged to give every state of the Federation 10 billion and also said they were going to support businesses or business support with 650 billion. That will take care of processing.
Okay.
You know, as far as the situation is concerned, the tendency to do grandiose projects should stop. We should look at food because that is peace for the nation. You can see what happened in Kenya. They were trying to sign into law a finance bill. The youth came out and said no. In fact, there was violence. I was there. I went for the AGSIS meeting on food security in Africa. I was there. I saw what happened. The president had to come out to say he had withdrawn that. Now, the issue is Africa. It's not only Nigeria. And with AFTA, Nigeria is also open to serving other nations whom we have been serving before. We have been feeding almost all the countries in this hemisphere. If you take the Nigerian Republic, Cote d'Ivoire, and all those places, our foods get to those places.
Yes,
now, the pressure on Nigeria is enormous. the population is ever rising. Investments in agriculture cannot be too much. We must target them. In fact, food system means productivity, production, processing, distribution, marketing, and consumption. So these things have to be met to get a balance. And this is what happens in those countries that say they have food security. If you take the United States, for instance, this is what happens. If you take even China today, you know, before now we were calling it an iron cutting country. We were calling it a poor nation. Today, I'm sure the United States is only afraid of China. But there are other things, you know, that you need to deploy. A lot of technology and good science to optimize productivity. And you can use this everywhere. It doesn't have to be in an urban area, because in fact, in urban areas, these things don't take place. Sure. You see, there are food crops that you can use to really optimize productivity. If you take Brazil, for instance, until about 20 years ago, Brazil was a third world country, referred to as a third world country.
That's true.
Today, you cannot do that. In fact, most of the maize that used to come into Nigeria before we took some decisions, most of it came from Brazil because of the voyage time between Rio de Janeiro and Lagos, which was just 2 weeks. As president of Poultry Association of Nigeria, I knew that it was cheaper to buy from Brazil, but most of that, in fact, all of the maize that came was GM maize.
Yeah.
So that technology has been used successfully in those places.
Yeah.
Now, if you take India, when I was going to school, in fact, most of my science teachers were Indians and Sri Lankans. Today, the Indians you see here come with their briefcases to do business.
For contracts.
They have enough food. In fact, they are net exporters of even rice. It's cheaper to even get rice from India than anywhere else into Nigeria. Why? Because they have embraced biotechnology that gives rise to GM crop.
Yes, and in the course of our conversation, we will be doubling down on GM foods like you've inferred there. I want to take you a bit back to when you talked about countries along the Sahel and, you know, neighboring countries that also somewhat depend on Nigeria for food. And we do know for a fact that, you know, there are large pockets of food deserts along that Gulf, along that coast as well. And you see poor families, you know, struggling. You know, this whole issue of rising food prices and shortages, we hear accounts and reports, you know, of how concerning situations are in the local government. You know, even, I mean, here in Nigeria, where poor, struggling families are most vulnerable and are having to spend more than 65% of their disposable income on food alone. I mean, the situation also raises questions on nutritional demands as well, and whether these struggling families are just contented with getting something to eat, you know, and less worried about nutritional quality of what they are consuming. What are the data, I mean, as the president of the All Farmers Association, do you perhaps, you know, monitor the data, or what are the data saying on this situation, and how, again, do you think the subnationals can take advantage of certain crops, you know, perhaps to encourage initiatives that enable families to grow and consume foods that, you know, could close these nutritional gaps?
Well, you made, there's one very important point that you made. Some families have disposable income of 65%. Nobody has any disposable income.
No, I'm saying they spend whatever it is that...
Now, let me get down to the question you are asking.
Yes, please.
You see, the food system, the global food system, had its challenge beginning from COVID-19. If you recall, the Secretary General of the UN convened a conference worldwide for the food systems. And they were talking about a lot of poverty, a lot of insufficiency of food and nutritional components in the world. So Nigeria, also there is climate change, if you remember. Climate change plays a very vital role in all of these things. Now we have drought, we have floodings. All these are threat factors to food sufficiency. They happen. Yes, indeed, there are many, many people who hardly are able to feed themselves, not only in Nigeria, in all of Africa. If you look at what is happening around Africa as a whole, in fact, there is no place that will call itself food sufficient. But there is something that we should do, you know, as a nation. I don't know,
Okay.
I'm not an economist, but let me proffer this solution.
Please.
And then this is coming from my experiences in Egypt. You see, the Egyptian pound is going through a lot of stresses also, just like the Naira.
The Naira.
But if you go to buy food anywhere in Cairo, the differences in prices are very minimal. To the extent that today, if you go to Cairo with your own money, with dollar, you will be able to eat like a king.
Is that largely from, is that largely from food subsidy by the government?
No. It is the psyche of the citizens.
Okay.
You see, in Nigeria, for instance, there are many crops that should not be dollarized because they have no dollar component. I am in the construction industry. People go to, nobody buys sand from the river, and nobody exhausts it. Here in Abuja, a trailer load of 30 tons of sand cost over 180,000. And that kind of thing is only leveraged on the cost of diesel.
So when you say something...
Now listen to me.
Yes, I want to redirect you quickly to the conversation or the point you just raised there about certain commodities not being dollarized. Can you give us examples of what you mean? Take
yam, for instance.
Yes.
Where is the dollar component in yam? I can understand the dollar component in tomato because one, the seeds are actually imported. Largely.
Okay.
Two, we have to use pesticide and herbicides and all that in bringing it up. Now, it has a short shelf life. We need to take it quickly to place of need. We need to do a lot of preservation. So if it costs a lot, and then also when the seasons change, like now when there is a lot of water from the rains, you cannot easily plant any of these things on outdoors. You have to use greenhouses and all that.
Yes.
So those greenhouses cost money and all that. So that's understandable. If you go to maize, rice, and all that, it's all these herbicides and all that will happen. But here we are, I still go back to GM. There is a lot of discussion today, and there are so many things in the social media that baffle me because, I'm from science. I believe and accept science. I'm an architect. If there was no science, I would not be an architect. This studio, as wide as it is, it would not have been built, but for science, with this span. So for me, some of the discussions that are happening are out of ignorance. Because I have given you examples of some countries where they have food security and they are using GM. If you take the United States, you take Canada, you take Brazil, you take India, you even take Argentina. So all these countries are there. And Kenya, which was against GMO, is now embracing GMO. Because just last week, while I was attending the Axis meeting, our people from NABDA and some of the former DG of MDMA were in Mombasa. And the man who created telomerase here were in Mombasa to give them the success story of telomerase. They are doing GM now. So the whole world is really looking at this and really relying on science to take decisions, not on sentiment.
But here in Nigeria, what we have is a situation where there are safety concerns, and also the issue of control. Because you know what they say, that he who controls the food probably controls the country or the people.
Well, you see,
farmers
have a misunderstanding of control.
Yes.
My mind goes to the control of the proliferation of these GM crops, and the mandate is with the National Biosafety Management Agency. There is a law already. In fact, it was not promulgated by Tinubu or even Buhari. The law came into being from Jonathan's time.
Yes. How then do we allay the fears of farmers and let them see the long-term gains of GMOs?
Now, I will tell you this. I was privileged to attend a meeting or a discussion in Trust TV, Trust Radio, about Friday or even before, I can't remember, but it was soon after I think it was Friday. Now, there was a farmer who came in the discussion to say that they planted maize, Stella maize, in Lere in Kaduna State. And I think their leader, the district head, told them to remove it. So they uprooted. But he was invited to that discussion that I told you. A day before, he had a discussion even with the person who really created teller maize here in Nigeria, Professor Rabiu Adamu. His fears were allayed. He said he would go back to that district head to tell him that, look, the science that I have had and that the person who created this thing is in Zaria, IAR, and that I have been going for meetings in IAR. So this thing is safe. This man will not give us what will kill us. He will not give himself what will kill himself. He will not give his relations. And there was something that was trending. Somebody was calling the name of God doing this, and he was being religious and condemning teller maize. Now, when they played it, I asked who that man was. What was his name? They said all along in the video, in the audio, he didn't mention his name. I said, well, let him mention his name. Let us ask where he's coming from. Let him support his argument. And all those people who are saying there is a nexus between any teller maize, we have only teller maize and PBR cowpea here in Nigeria that were officially released.
Yes,
now, let anybody, among the antis, let them come out and tell us precisely that this disease was as a result of consuming PBR cowpea.
And the benefits are quite enormous for the farmer. Not only will it put, as in increase their produce, it will put more money in their pocket. And, it makes them spend less on production, as it were. So
but in fact, let me even give you another angle. Okay. You see, there is a lot of, there are many explanations for some of the behavior, some of the things that are being said. Do you know the people who make the insecticide and herbicide, they're a very big concern. If you embrace teller maize that you don't spray, if you embrace PBR cowpea that you don't spray, we used to spray it 10 times. Now with the PBR, you would just spray maybe twice. Those people have no market, so they can sponsor people to talk a lot of rubbish. Okay. Now, some people listen to me.
Let's not make accusations here.
No, I want to tell you something. I was on Arise TV, and some of them said, corporations give us money to come and talk. Now, which corporation? As far as I'm concerned, the PBR cowpea and the teller maize were produced here by our scientists. And I want anybody to name the corporation or government concern that has given me money to tell the farmers to use this one. I protect the farmers. In fact, I'm the mouthpiece of the farmers.
True.
I am here because of farmers.
True.
How can and my parents, in fact, my village, we are 99% agrarian. So how can I ask them to plant what will harm them?
True. Our time is up already. There's still a lot more to talk about. What we'll do is to segment our conversation. So we would have a part one, and then we'll have a part two. For this week, this will be the part one. For next week, we'll plan a part two, because this, of course, is a critical and germane issue, and we need to continue this conversation. But very quickly, before I let you go, there's this very critical aspect of the conversation, of course, which has to do with the security component, even though you alluded to it at the very beginning. I would like to ask how you think the federal and state governments, in tackling, this issue of insecurity, how much so can they do to boost the safety of farmers and farming communities? I mean, look at states like Zamfara. Look at states like, Zamfara used to tout itself as, and its farming prowess. In fact, its logo is farming is our pride. Benue, we know as the food basket of the nation. But, I mean, the security situations in these states, some of these states, are making farmers, unable, giving farmers a hard time and a hard time, returning to their farms owing to the activities of bandits and terrorists. How critical is security to Nigeria's national food security objective? So much so that, the farmer's confidence is buoyed enough for him to gladly return to the farm. Very quickly.
You see, the most important threat factor to the attainment of food security is insecurity. That's why when the president declared a state of emergency on food security, I said there should be a corresponding state of emergency on insecurity. And I want to say that if care is taken and due diligence is done, the 10 billion to every governor in Nigeria should also be used to fight insecurity. I am glad that the president acceded to our demand that They should invest more in agriculture and also in stemming insecurity.
I think
And
this
I
will
believe
be- Yes.
I'm from Katsina State.
Yes.
The border to the state that you said was saying that agriculture was its pride. It's been 6 years or so since I went to my farm in that area. So I know what it feels. My people are even being abducted from their homes. If you check, it's in the news. In Faskari, I'm from Faskari, 3 people, young people, were abducted recently. So insecurity is the most important threat factor to the attainment of food security. So a lot of work has to be done to ensure that there is security, so that the farmers will seamlessly go to their farms and produce assiduously to feed the population of this country that is barely 200 million now. In 24 years, or 26 years, we will be 400 million.
I think,
Where are we going
I think
to
we'll
get
take a pause here. There's still plenty to talk about. Like I said, we would have a part 2 of this conversation. I would like for us to double down on the issue of GMOs, talk about the issue of safety and concerns and, these, tussle between the corporations like you've alluded to. And of course, there's also the issue of flooding. You made allusions to climate change earlier. I would also like for us to bring that up. And so we would continue our conversation on these issues, going forward. I'd like to thank you so much, President of Farmers Association of Nigeria, Kabiru Ibrahim. Thank you so much for coming on our program, for coming on Insight. We would expect to see you again next week so that we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much. Indeed.
Thank you very much for having me to share my insight on what happens in the food system. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure, but I know you wear many caps. You do also wear one for West Africa. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Would you quickly remind us?
No. In West Africa, AFAN is only a member, but I am the president of the agribusiness group in Nigeria. I'm also the chairman board of trustees of the National Agricultural Foundation of Nigeria.
Very well done. Very well.
So
thank you so much for coming. We expect to see you again next week so we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.